Maddie Lake is one of 3 children, the oldest experiment of the family. Is going to be a senior at Texas Lutheran College next year. Just doesn't seem surreal. She is a political science major who refuses to go to law school despite her father's pushings. She is also highly involved with the campus ministry at Texas Lutheran and can be found back in the command center over there on any given Wednesday during chapel to make sure that the microphones and the live stream are working. And on top of all that, she's been an activist in some capacity or another since she was 16 years old, dragging her mother and father into places they never dreamed they would ever be. And it has been a good journey, and we are thrilled to death to have her here today as a representative of the young adults of the ELCA and her trip to the border. Maddie Lake, welcome to the pulpit this morning. You would like this? Yes, ma'am. Not an unreasonable request. You're welcome. A moment there.
Wonderful. Well, hello, everybody. Good morning. I do have to preface that the last time I did this here at Tree of Life was May of 2020. None of y'all were here. It was a camera and me. So bear with me as I practice this in front of people now. Well, as he said, I had the opportunity to go to the border back in April. I'm going to tell you all a little bit about that. Back in January, I got a call from my dad asking me if I wanted to take a trip to the U.S.-Mexico border with the ELCA. Applications were open for an opportunity for 15 young adults to go to the border to learn more about immigration. 15 of us from across the border would be selected to go and then serve on a year-long ambassadorship with the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. My father, knowing about my passion for advocacy, thought I'd be a strong candidate, so I applied, and I was accepted a few months later. And so, on April 26th, I boarded a plane and I flew to El Paso, Texas. It's an hour-and-a-half flight. It's a 9-hour drive. You can see why I made that decision. Where I would then spend the next 5 days there and in Las Cruces, New Mexico, with 17 others, learning, seeing, and understanding what it means to immigrate to the U.S. via the southern border. Before I tell you about what I learned, though, I want to tell you a little bit about the people I was there with. This is our little group. There were 14 of us participants and 3 really cool leaders from the ELCA. We came from all over the place: Arizona, Kansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Kentucky, North Carolina, Florida, DC, Massachusetts, and 5 of us from Texas. We spent a lot of time together squished in a 15-passenger van, and when you're that close with 14 other adults, you really get to know a person, and subsequently really got close with each other. I'm grateful for the group I got to go with and can tell you that my trip would have been very different had I gone with any other people. And together with all of these wonderful people, we found ourselves at the border. I'm going to show you a picture I took in El Paso at a place called Scenic Drive Overlook that overlooks the city of El Paso and Juarez. Can you tell me where the border is in this photo? No? Neither can I. How about now? Maybe? Now. It took about 10 minutes until somebody finally pointed out that little red X to me that I was finally able to see the border. For me, it just looked like one really big city. I could not tell you where El Paso ended and Juarez began. I can tell you, though, that that red line that I've drawn on this picture is the difference between life and death for some people. For many, instead of telling you who I met with and all the things I saw in the order of my trip, I'm going to show it to you in the order that someone on their immigration journey would, which means this story starts with the whole wide world. There are many reasons someone may be leaving their home country for a better life. These reasons are called push factors and can be anything from war, political instability, famine, drought, family violence, and more. Life for them is no longer viable in their home country, and they have now made the difficult and expensive journey to leave for somewhere better. The organization that was hosting our trip, Border Servant Corps, has seen immigrants from 55 different countries in the last 5 years. In their cafeteria hangs flags from each of them. People come from all over the world to find a better life here in the US. For many, their journey to America will start in South America. Many countries in South America do not require visas to fly to them, and so people immigrating from Europe, Asia, and Africa will fly to these countries and begin the treacherous journey from there. The journey to the US is tedious and difficult. One of the first difficulties they face is called the Darien Gap, a 60-mile area of dense rainforest in Colombia and Panama. Once considered impossible to cross, this area is extremely difficult, and unfortunately is where the journey ends for some, with many migrants dying trying to cross. The only way to avoid going through the gap is to take a boat around, which often comes with its own risks and financial burdens. And so most make the journey through this rainforest. Once they have made it through the gap and up to Central America, they have to transfer through each country on their way to the US-Mexico border. This is often costly, as cartels, also known as transnational crime organizations by the US Customs and Border Protection, patrol the border and then require people to pay them to cross through the country. The price always varies and is not a guarantee of safety. If someone fails to pay or an organization chooses their mind, they will keep those people hostage, and then the cartels will go to find their families and people they know to get more money from them before they either release them or kill them. Additionally, there's often much violence that migrants face on their way up to the border, with as many as 1 in 3 women trying to get to the US experiencing sexual assault. By the time these people make it to our southern border, they are traumatized, without resources, and physically exhausted or injured. It can take as few as a few months to get to the border to as much as a few years. It's a journey that unfortunately many do not survive. But before we talk about what the process through the border and into the US looks like, I have to give you all a brief introduction to the current immigration policy in the US. And unlike my American Politics 2 teacher, where it took a whole month to get through all of that, we're going to do that in a little less than a page. US policies on immigration has varied a lot in the last 30 years. It's varied a lot in the last 3 weeks. When I went to the border 3 weeks ago, we were under a policy called Title 42. Title 42 is a public health policy issued by the CDC during global pandemics. This policy allows anyone attempting to claim asylum in the US to be turned away without asylum hearings. Under this policy, anyone from Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, and other countries were not allowed to claim asylum in the United States during this time to protect public health. But on May 12th, 11 days after my trip, Title 42 was rolled back when the public health crisis was declared over, and Title 8, the policy that was there previously, was reinstated. The main difference between Title 8 and Title 42 is that while under 42 you could not claim asylum, you could attempt re-entry as many times as you wanted. This is often why you see immigration numbers in the last few years really, really high, is because US border and customs protection does not count individual people crossing the borders, but the number of times they encounter people. This means that you can attempt re-entry 5 times and be listed as 5 separate people when trying to cross the border. This leads to an inflation of the numbers. However, Title 8 does not allow for re-entry. If you claim asylum in the US and fail your asylum proceedings, you are issued a 5-year ban from re-entering the US again. Asylum is the main way that people attempt immigration in the United States, and it is incredibly hard to be awarded. If you do not have a lawyer, it's actually almost impossible. And lawyers are expensive and hard to come by, and so most do not have one. In order to claim asylum in the United States, you have to be on US soil. You quite literally have to cross the border in order to go through the legal asylum process. Currently, the system set up by Customs and Border Protection is an appointment system that can only be accessed via a mobile app called CBP One. This app, just like many apps in the App Store, is fraught with technical difficulties, and appointment slots are often extremely difficult to come by. While in violation of international immigration law, currently the U.S. only allows for these appointments at ports of entry, which are often far apart and limited in number. If you do not have access to a phone, someone who has the app, or you cannot find an appointment at your nearest port of entry, you are left with only two options, as you are not able to access the U.S. asylum system. Your two options are to cross the border without being encountered or remain in place where you are. But let's say you're one of the lucky ones. You have a phone, you got the app, you found an appointment time at your nearest ports of entry. What happens next? You turn yourself into Border Patrol and immediately begin the deportation process. Customs and Border Patrol attempts to process people within 72 hours. However, this process most of the time lasts longer, with reports of people being in detention for up to months at a time trying to get processed. We actually got an opportunity to meet with Customs and Border Protection during this time. We met with two agents in a park, once referred to as Unity Park, a park that was a place for people from both countries to come together and be in community. However, this park has now been separated by the border wall. A singular park meant for peace and unity has now been turned into two parks of isolation. Meeting with Customs and Border Protection was a unique experience, one I'm really glad I got to have, but did not leave me feeling any more reassured by the U.S.'s current immigration policy and practices. The process through Border Protection is often incredibly difficult and unsafe, with many of the conditions of the centers that these people stay in being unclean and without resources. Another group we met with was the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, who explained to us how these detention centers are run and the issues that many of them face. Like most prisons in the United States, every single detention facility owned by the U.S. Border and Customs Protection and ICE are privately owned and operated. This means that any oversight that the government may have is pretty much removed. Many migrants have died in these facilities or left worse than how they entered. Once you've been processed by Customs and Border Protection, you are released into the United States under deportation proceedings. You're given a court date and a place to be seen, and then you can begin your asylum proceedings. In the sector of the border we are in, there is one group that manages all the released migrants in the area. This organization is called Annunciation House. They've been around for about 46 years now and are completely volunteer and donation run. We got to meet with their executive director, Ruben Garcia, who told us about what it means to go through this process. He quite literally gets a text message on his phone every morning from U.S. Customs and Border Protection saying this is how many migrants we're releasing. And in turn, he texts them back and tells them how many they can take and where to send them. The migrants are taken to places called hospitality centers, places that provide clean and safe places to stay, with hot meals and resources like clean clothing and showers. We got to tour two of these hospitality centers, Iglesia Luterana Cristo Rey and Border Servant Corps. Iglesia Luterano Cristo Rey is this itty-bitty ELCA Lutheran church in El Paso, Texas. They've turned part into their building into being able to host 20 to 30 migrants for up to a week once a month while they get ready for the next part of their journey. We met with Pastor Juan de Dios Lopez, an immigrant himself, who told us about what it was like for their congregation. While their congregation was small and had very little themselves, they did everything they could to support these people who were making the same journey many of them had also made. Pastor Lopez also talked about the first night they had migrants in their space. The thing that these migrants first went to was a cross that had been hanging on the side of their sanctuary. For many, since their journey began, it was a safe and holy space to be with God. The young boys that had been in that first group cried in front of the cross, thanking God for all that they had made it and He had come through for them. It reminds me of our scriptures for today from John. They knew with certainty that I had come from you, and they believed that you sent me. I pray for them. I am not praying for the world, but for those who you have given me, for they are yours. All I have is yours, and all you have is mine, and glory has come to me through them. Despite this incredibly difficult journey these people had been on, they still came to the cross. They knew that they had been given to Christ and would be safe. And through the acts of the congregation, they were shared in that experience of that all that was being offered to them was through God, and that through God, all was being offered to them. Border Servant Corps was the other hospitality center we got to visit. The group that was hosting us also runs a hospitality center. They accept up to 250 migrants a day who get to stay there for 24 hours at a time, where they are provided the same resource that Iglesia Luterano Cristo Rey offers, but also medical care and transportation. When the people arrive from Customs and Border Protection, they are given documents, these white pieces of paper, that allow them to travel within the United States. Most people that come through our border do not remain at the border. They move towards the interior of the United States, where people they know and job opportunities await them. And so what Border Servant Corps does is they have these buses that will take people to the bus station or the airport or wherever their transportation is going to take them next. 50% of all the people that Border Servant Corps receives every month are children, itty-bitty children. When you arrive at the hospitality center, one of the first things you actually see is a playground. Each day we went to the hospitality center, the playground was always the busiest place, full of parents on the phone trying to get plane tickets or bus tickets and trying to get to the next location, and children screaming and playing on the playground. When you looked at the faces of these small children, though, you would see these dark, sunken-in black circles around their eyes. The journey they had just been on was treacherous and traumatic, but now, for the first time in a really long time, these kids felt safe enough to play. In the media, when we talk about migrants, we're often told of stories of these really dangerous people who are here to steal our jobs and are here to commit crimes. I can tell you, when I met these people, I met scared human beings trying to keep them and their families safe and alive. People who had accomplished nearly the impossible and had finally made it to the United States to begin a safe life. This is not where the story ends, though, because once they are here, they begin the next difficult part of the process of trying to integrate themselves into society. We got to travel through these little small towns in New Mexico called colonias. They're places with limited resources and almost exclusively trailer homes. These places are often landing zones for migrants in New Mexico, places where they have community and opportunities. They aren't easy places to live in, but they are better than the places they have come from. And one of these colonias is a place called the Women's Intercultural Center, a place for women and the community to come together to be in fellowship with others. They offer classes like art and sewing and a karaoke night, and get the community resources and more. We met with their executive director, Mary Carter, who showed us around the space and told us about what they did there. Their center is one of a kind. Their building is actually made out of recycled compacted tires, is the only type of that building in the country. They won an architecture design award for it. And they have a policy where anything that is donated to them gets used. I mean, everything. As you can see here, we've got shelves made out of 8th grade Texas literature textbooks, and their art classroom tables are donated ping pong tables with the nets removed because they're bigger. You can do better quilting projects on them, is what I was told. The other really cool thing about the Women's Intercultural Center is they've developed their own citizenship test curriculum. 100% of their students pass the citizenship test, which is notoriously extremely difficult to do. On the front of their prep binders are people who have just recently passed the test and received their citizenship to the United States. They teach the class in both Spanish and English and have little note cards where you can practice before the test. Citizenship is the dream for these people, the goal that most of them have, to not just come to the United States to live safe and productive lives, but to also become an American and help make the US the best place it can be. When we finished our last full day, we ended up going to the Mira Las Cruces, New Mexico Spring Fest, an art and community engagement festival. It was very cool. I almost bought soap, but then it wasn't gonna make it through TSA, so I had to leave it there. It was beautiful, and it was wonderful to get to see all that this community had to bring, to see people together despite that all was happening around them, to show that what all these cultures together could produce, beautiful art and fellowship together. The morning before we all returned back to our respective homes, we walked to church, specifically Peace Lutheran Church in Las Cruces, New Mexico. This ELCA church is significant as they had been the ones to start Border Servant Corps. What had originally started as this church just hosting a few migrants in their fellowship hall had turned into a full-time nonprofit that in the last 5 years has assisted over 50,000 migrants. The congregation truly embodied the motto by the ELCA, God's work, our hands. And before we knew it, the service was over, and our time together as a group had come to an end. There's not a lot of times I can say a trip has changed my life, but I can tell you that the Maddie Lake that flew into El Paso was not the same one that came back. There is so much more I could say about what I saw, what I heard, what I learned, but I do think you all want to go home today, so I'll start to wrap this all up. We all have migration stories, whether that's how your family got to the United States, how you got to Texas, how you got to Conroe, how you even got to Tree of Life. We all, in one way or another, have been migrants. I would like you to ask yourself, if it was me or my family making the difficult decision to leave everything we know behind to go and find a safe place to live, how would I want the people on the other end to receive me? And then ask yourself, how can I maybe be of help to these people in the midst of these difficult journeys? On the last night we were in Las Cruces, we had a small worship service together as a group. We prayed, we read, we sang, we had communion together, which was orange juice and leftover tortillas. It was beautiful. The song we sang that night is one you can find in the hymns right in front of you. ELW 712, Lord, whose love and humble service. We sang off of sheets of notebook paper that two girls had spent time writing out in the 15-passenger van on our way back to our living space. I want to read to you the second and fourth verses, though I encourage you to look at the full song when you've got a chance. Still your children wander homeless, still the hungry cry for bread, still the captives long for freedom, still in grief we mourn our dead. As you, Lord, in deep compassion, healed the sick and freed the soul, by your Spirit send your power to our world to make it whole. Called by worship to your service, forth in your dear name we go, to the child, the youth, the aged, love and living deeds to show. Hope and health, goodwill and comfort, counsel, aid, and peace we give. That your servants, Lord, and freedom, may your mercy know and live. The border is a place of beauty and hurt. May we be the people of God who are called by worship to his service, to provide homes for the children who wander homeless, feed the hungry who cry for bread, free the captives who long for freedom, and support the people who await at our border for a safe place to live. God's grace and peace to you this morning, and amen.